My title is going to be some questions on the why, the how, and the what of data publishing, trying to fit in with the themes of the session. Fiona's introduced me very nicely, and I'm grateful for that. So I started as CoData Executive Director on the 1st of August, so I'm brand new there. I ought to also to add that I'm on the board of directors of the Dryer Data Repository. So I'm going to give a couple of examples from that initiative in the talk. So what is CoData? So the mission statement is there for you to read. I can't quite read it down here, actually, but by now I ought to sort of have some grasp on it. But as I say, we see data as playing an essential role in strengthening the way in which international science and science in general is conducted. CoData has been around for some time. It was established in 1966, very much as an organization for data zealots internationally, in order that they could get together and compare ideas and share notes and generally promote through international agreement the availability and the quality of data which is necessary to underpin international research. One of the things that's distinctive about CoData is that we are genuinely international. We have 23 national members, and this ranges from China through Japan, through India. More recently, we've had Mongolia and the Czech Republic grown, and we have members on all continents. And I suppose another particular feature is that because we're an interdisciplinary body of the International Council for Science, ICSU, based in Paris, we have a particularly strong link with the international scientific unions, so the International Union of Crystallography, the International Union of Pure and Applied Biology, etc., etc. And through those links, we feel that we can play an important role in seeing to the disciplinary requirements with regard to data quality and data availability. So what we actually do, what we are essentially, is a meeting house, an assembly, an international community and network of expertise on data issues, a means by which experts on data and people that care about data can get together and make agreements. We also feel through our activities that we can provide authority through those agreements, through that expertise. We can provide an authoritative voice on data policy issues at a national and international level, and we've got a relatively good track record of doing that. CoData inputted a lot of expertise into the OECD data principles on availability of public data, and also the data sharing agreements of international research activities like GEO, in the geospatial area and the International Polar Year. We've been influential in leveraging data sharing agreements in those activities. And thereby we hope to provide a focal point for international and cross-disciplinary collaboration around data issues. So a quick overview of CoData's activities. They fall into three categories. This is sort of taken from our strategic plan. So the three areas that we work in are policy frameworks for data, and thereby taking the lead in setting agenda for the availability and quality of scientific data. We're in the process of setting up an international data policy committee, which we hope will be the organ by which we can provide this sense of authority and provide expertise and advice for international activities. We're also advising ICSU, which is currently undertaking a consultation process to produce a report on the current state of affairs with regard to open access for scientific publications, open access for data, and the use of metrics in assessing scientific outputs. They're holding a workshop in Paris on the 25th of this month, and that will start a process by which they produce a report laying out the ICSU position and the position of the international unions. The other area of our activities we dub Frontiers of Data Science. So CoData is very much an organization for expert data scientists internationally. And what we have done in the past and will continue to do is to run series of high-level workshops, bringing together experts in particular areas to push the frontiers of data science and to understand what the emerging issues are and how these may be tackled collectively. The other area of activity is capacity building. So we're very keen to build a curriculum, for example, and a curriculum framework, at least, that might be recognized internationally for the skills and the qualifications that are required for data scientists. There's a number of areas, activities that we're involved in. We run a biannual conference, international conference of data science, and the next one will be in New Delhi in November 2014. We run a data science journal, and we have a set of task groups and working groups. And then finally, the third area of our activity is really to support the ICSU mission. So to work closely with programs of international science, which sort of form an umbrella through which scientists can collaborate on particular challenges. So ICSU is just launching a program called Future Earth, which looks at issues of sustainable development in a period of climate change, and and bringing that together with interdisciplinary studies on the social science aspects, the human aspects of confrontation with climate change and disaster issues as well. Okay, here's just an example of the sort of outputs that come from our task groups. So we've got a fairly long-standing task group on data citation and practice, which imminently, I'm told, will be producing a report called Out of Sight, Out of Mind, which lays out a very cogent and strongly thought through set of principles to justify and to indicate how data might be cited in scientific literature, really addressing why this should be the case and what sort of issues and information data citations should cover. There's a number of organizations looking at this sort of issue, a number of collaborative groups and working groups looking at this sort of issue at the moment. And I think the CoData task group has the virtue of having really thought about this from a first principles point of view. And we think it's a very positive contribution to those discussions. So that's CoData. I've only used up about 5 minutes of the time. So now the sort of the main bulk of the presentation. What do we mean by data publication? So I thought I'd introduce these challenges by considering what we mean by data publication, and then looking at some of the, why is data publication something that people are interested in at the moment, and then looking at some of the challenges and how this might indicate how we should go about data publication and some of the issues that we need to tackle during this process. So, first of all, data publication. To a large extent, many data centers see as part of their job as making data public, and a number of data centers ask for the data center to be recognized in any citation of the data used, and they see themselves to an extent as a publisher of the data in the sense that they make it public. But I think we're talking here about something a little bit more specific, which is the process of integrating data availability and data citation and references to data more intrinsically, in a more integrated way with scholarly communications. So there's an example, I'll give us a quick list of examples of sort of things that are going on at the moment. There's efforts to improve the linking between data sets which are mentioned in the literature and the literature itself. And an example is the Pangaea and Elsevier two-way linking, which you may be aware of. Improved visualizations and access to data behind the graph, and that's something which can be provided in a number of ways. For example, the Figshare widgets, which the faculty of 1000 are using. The Dryad approach is to encourage authors and to provide a means whereby authors can publish a data package which is associated with a peer review article. And there's also a number of initiatives to create a new form of publication, data papers, data descriptors, or data journals, where really the object is to provide a detailed description of the data set under discussion, and thereby provide a mechanism whereby researchers can get recognition for making data available. And there is speculation that this might all lead to a new form of publication, the article of the future, where in some way or another, through these widgets, through these visualizations, the article somehow more than the sum of its parts, and you have this deep-grained integration between the literature and the data. So why are people interested in data publication at the moment? It's argued that there are benefits for research. It provides a means as well for researchers to fulfill funder mandates, and that it encourages researchers to do the good thing, to make the data available, to provide adequate description, because they will get credit and recognition for having done so. And there's perhaps an interest in this for publishers as well, that this will lead down the road to better products which are of benefit to research, to scientists, and to the publishing community. I mentioned there some of the policy drivers. I'm not going to go into these in detail, but the shift in culture and in expectations, I think, is very well summed up by the Royal Society report, which says as a first step towards achieving the objectives of having more available and reusable data, the first achievable step is to ensure that the data that underpin the findings, the evidence for the findings in a given research article, should be concurrently available and accessible in a database which is accessible via the web. It should be stressed, though, that this is just the first step. The Royal Society report has some interesting definitions of what it means by data availability and intelligent openness with regard to data, and I think they're worth paying some attention to. They argue that the data should be accessible, you can get at it. It should be accessible, you understand the provenance of it, you know where it has come from, you know the people that has made it, and the research techniques that have been used to create the data in question. And it should be intelligible, it should have sufficient information about it in order that it should be usable. This idea of aligning and integrating more data availability and the process of making data available with scholarly communications, I think, is nicely set up in this vision statement from one of the people who's very much involved in the Dryad Initiative, and it is aptly named Todd Vision. So this is from an it's a set of principles from the Dryad pages, and it makes the case that the credibility and effectiveness of the research enterprise is due in large part to a social contract, an agreement whereby researchers put their work out for discussion and criticism, and in return get recognition and career reward. And the mission of Dryad very much can be summed up in these terms, that we want to extend that social contract and that practice to include the availability of research data. So in these activities, what are the challenges? So there's a very useful article by Parsons and Peter Fox, which appeared in the Data Science Journal, which lays out some of them. And these challenges are taken in part from that article, but also from elsewhere. And I think these issues are worth bearing in mind as we tackle the issue of data publication, because they're things that need to guide the sort of data publication which we may or may not want to create. So they point out that data are not necessarily susceptible to the same publication model. Data are changing, they're dynamic, and sometimes in terms of research and reproducibility and what other researchers are interested, it's not necessarily the data as such which is important, because that can be a dynamic and a given thing, but it's the algorithms, it's the analysis, it's the way in which knowledge was extracted from those data. There's also the question of which data to share. In many research areas, there's lots of different data stages which data goes through. So in crystallography, for example, there's raw data, reduced data, and then the final science-ready data which describes the structure of the crystal in question. Which of these data types is it appropriate or necessary to share? And these questions need to be considered. Is the publication model flexible enough to cope with the diversity of data, and how can we make it flexible enough to do so? Will associating data with the publication process make the data more discoverable and reusable? We have to ensure that is the case. And can we cater for those areas of research where it's essential that the data should be accessed at scale by machines, that, so that web-scale data mining can happen over lots of diverse data sets, rather than just the publishing model, which seems to imply that one downloads a particular data package for analysis by a single researcher. We have to be able to cope with that. So some more challenges. Is the integration of data and publication actually what the various parties involved in scholarly communication want? Well, it seems to support funder policy, and it seems to be a route by which researchers can fulfill funder policy. There is this possibility that publishers may thereby have an improved product. But is it what the researchers and the editorial boards of journals want? And I think that's a question that needs to be posed of various research areas. Are the business models sustainable? And how do we ensure that the data are also discoverable and reusable outside the publication system, as I've mentioned? We need to have sufficient metadata that the data can be accessed on their own. They need to have a life outside the publication system as well as within the publication system. I think none of these are insurmountable, but they all need careful attention. Now, Fiona, I think that's probably my time. I've got a couple of slides with examples, but I could happily stop there with posing those questions if that's more appropriate. Yeah? You sure? Okay. Okay, so two examples on relating to data policy. So the Dryad initiative was really set up by an agreement between a set of journals which decided to produce a joint data archiving policy. And they felt that this was a good thing in that sphere of research, which was evolutionary biology and ecology. So the journal editorial board got together and designed a data availability policy, which they agreed all at the same time to release. And then the Dryad data repository has been made to fulfill and provide a means by which that data availability policy can be achieved. And I think that's important because it's an example of the way that policy is an expression of a community will to do something in a certain way. When I was at JISC, we funded a project called JORD to look at the state of the landscape of journal data availability policies. And we found with a relatively large sample that only 50% of journals made any real mention of data that could be described as a data availability policy. And only 25 of those, so 12.5% of the sample itself, could be characterized as strong in the sense that they required that data should be made available and deposited somewhere. And there's also a long-standing, there's an ongoing issue with data availability policies and with research funder policies as well, in that they tend to rest upon general principles, and that's fine, but they don't provide a great deal of guidance to the researchers, to the journals, to the data infrastructure as to what sort of standards should be used, to what sort of repositories should be used. And we need to evolve towards, if this vision of data publication is going to be realized, we need to evolve towards a situation where data policies take these things into account and provide, on the one hand, an expression of a community view over these issues, and provide more guidance to researchers as to what repositories and what standards to use. Another challenge is data sustainability. So I've said that I'm involved with the Dryad project. It's a not-for-profit data repository, which is really an experiment in finding a sustainable business model for maintaining a data resource which provides a service both to publishers and to researchers in a given research area. We have a strategy, and that strategy relies on low cost, relatively low curation, and high throughput. Our charging model, therefore, is low. We started charging on the 1st of September, and the cost per data package ranges between $50 and $80 per data package. At the moment, we started charging, and we've got income coming in from members, and it's looking extremely positive. It's an experiment, but we think it's a good idea. It's something that's good for the community, and we hope that it'll be sustainable. the diagram at the bottom I think sums up one of the aspects of that business model, in that it provides a route for open access to research data to be funded in part by research funders who would fund a research project, and then the money gets passed on through a chain, through the article processing fee, through the data deposit fee, to the journal, and then to the repository. Shall I end on this slide? Yeah. The sustainability of data repositories and of data publishing initiatives like this is important. So this is just a heads up to a working group which is part of the World Data Systems working group on data publication. So one of the subgroups of that initiative is looking at sustainability issues and cost recovery. So we've got a work plan there which we're going to also try to have as part of the Research Data Alliance initiative. And that is really, the work plan consists of trying to understand the various cost models, pulling together the state of the art of our knowledge about that, putting in some real numbers from the World Data System members, but also, above all, trying to analyze what cost recovery models are available and are being used by various data centers and by data publishing initiatives. Because after all, these are archives. They need to be around in the long term. When data is deposited, the data archive needs to be able to say, yes, we have a sustainable business model and we're going to be around in the long term to look after these data for posterity, or at the very least we have a plan for what would happen should the data repository go under. I think I've used up a lot of time. There's a couple of slides on the importance of metadata, but I'll leave you with that.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Simon.